A millionaire CEO hadn't touched a woman in 20 years, but his new assistant changed everything. Before we start the story, leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The atmosphere at Smith Enterprises was especially tense that morning. The usually busy hallways were filled with whispers and curious glances. "Have you heard?" one of the administrative employees whispered. "Yes. Henry Smith hired a new assistant. Does she know about the rule?" "I doubt it. This is going to be a disaster." The rule in question was simple but firm. Henry Smith didn't touch women. Ever. Not a handshake, not even an accidental brush against someone. Over the years, the female employees had grown used to this peculiarity. Some thought it was just billionaire eccentricity, while others had wild theories about some mysterious trauma. The fact remained, no one dared to get too close to him. But Sophia Morris, the newly hired personal assistant, knew nothing about this. It was her first day, and she couldn't understand why the atmosphere felt so heavy. The looks people gave her were a mix of pity and curiosity, as if she were a lamb walking straight into the lion's den. "Morris," Emma, the executive secretary, called out urgently. "Mr. Smith needs a tie. Grab one and take it to him now." Sophia blinked. "Sorry, what?" "The tie, Morris. He has a meeting in 10 minutes. Hurry." "Okay, just a tie. No big deal," she thought. What could go wrong? Sophia walked to the executive dressing room and opened the cabinet where Henry's ties were kept. And that's when a small problem arose. There were about 50 of them. "All right, what color would a cold, untouchable CEO wear?" she murmured to herself. She picked a navy blue one, then a black one, then a gray one. Then she panicked and grabbed them all. With her arms full of ties, she marched toward the CEO's office. She just had to go in, hand him the tie, and leave. Simple. She knocked on the door. "Come in." Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside and found Henry Smith standing by his desk, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt with the usual expression of someone who had just solved a financial crisis before breakfast. He looked up at her and frowned. "What is that?" "Ties," Sophia said, stopping in front of him. "All of them?" "I didn't know which color you preferred, so I brought them all." Henry stared at her for a moment before letting out a long sigh, as if summoning patience he didn't have. "Give me one." Sophia dropped all the ties onto the desk and randomly picked one to hand to him. Henry raised an eyebrow. "A patterned one?" She glanced at the tie and realized in her rush she had grabbed one with tiny rubber duck prints. "Oh." She quickly took it back. "Not that one, wait." She grabbed another and handed it to him. "Navy blue," Henry acknowledged with a brief nod. Sophia smiled, relieved. Mission accomplished. Now all she had to do was quietly walk out and then she saw it. Henry was tying his tie the wrong way. She blinked, then blinked again. He was absolutely destroying the fabric, as if he were trying to strangle an invisible ghost. "This is a crime against corporate fashion," Sophia thought, feeling an uncontrollable urge to step in. Without thinking too much, she stepped closer and raised her hands. "Wait, you're doing it wrong. Let me." And then she touched him. The moment her fingers brushed against the skin of his neck, Henry froze. Sophia felt his body tense under her fingertips. The sudden shift in the air was almost visible. And then, suddenly, "No." Henry jumped back as if he had been electrocuted. Sophia's eyes widened. "Oh my God, what happened?" Henry was staring at her, like he had just escaped a deadly attack. "You touched me." I was just fixing your tie." Sophia frowned, thinking that was an overreaction. "Never do that again." "Okay, relax. I'm not radioactive, you know?" Henry ran a hand over his neck, as if trying to erase the feeling of her touch. His breathing was uneven, and his eyes remained locked on her with a tormented look. "You don't understand," he said, his voice tight. "Then make me understand," Sophia shot back, crossing her arms. "Because honestly, this makes no sense at all." His fists clenched, as if he was fighting something inside himself. "I can't be touched." "What do you mean, can't? Do you explode? Turn into a frog?" "This is not a joke." Sophia fell silent. His tone was pure desperation. He was really shaken. Henry looked away, his jaw visibly clenched. "Just don't do it again." She hesitated, not knowing exactly what to say. She had never imagined someone could react so badly to a simple touch. But as she looked at his face, she saw something beyond anger. Fear. He was terrified. Sophia let out a sigh and raised her hands in surrender. "All right. I won't touch you again." Henry's shoulders relaxed just slightly, but he still looked tense. "You can go." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Fine, boss. No touching. But one day, I'm going to figure out what's so scary about it." She walked out of the office in a hurry, completely clueless about what had just happened. When the door closed behind her, Henry touched the spot where her fingers had been. His heart was still pounding. This had never happened before. But for some inexplicable reason, her touch was still there. And that changed everything. The entire office seemed to be a sea of curious stares as Sophia Morris walked out of the CEO's office, her face slightly flushed and her expression confused. She had no idea what had just happened. What was that? Henry Smith reacted to her touch, as if she had put a curse on him. Dramatic. That was the only word that came to Sophia's mind. She walked to her desk and dropped into her chair, massaging her temples. Her first day was already starting to feel like a disaster. "So you survived." The voice of Max Turner, the head of the finance department, sounded beside her. He was a man in his mid-30s, always carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had seen it all in this company. "What do you mean by survived?" Sophia frowned. Max leaned against her desk, taking a sip of his coffee. "No one touches Henry. Ever." Sophia blinked. "Okay, this is getting weird. Why not?" "Because he just can't stand it. He has this rule. No woman can touch him." Sophia huffed. "Well, he could have warned me before having a meltdown, right?" "Wait a second." Max's eyes widened. "You touched him?" "Technically, yes. But it was his fault. He had his tie all wrong and my need for order took over. So I just fixed it." Max looked at her as if she had just spilled coffee on the U.S. Constitution. "You put your hands on him?" "I just fixed his tie." The man let out a laugh, clearly in disbelief. "Congratulations, Sophia. You just broke 20 years of protocol." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. No one dies from an accidental touch." Little did she know, inside the CEO's office, Henry was completely unsettled. Henry Smith couldn't focus on work. His eyes were locked on the report open on his computer screen, but none of it made sense. The charts, the spreadsheets, the market forecasts, everything looked jumbled. And all because of what? A single touch. He ran his fingers along the collar of his shirt where his tie was still perfectly in place. That's what was making him so uneasy. He should have felt discomfort, disgust, anxiety, but he didn't feel any of that. Worse, he didn't feel anything bad at all. And that terrified him. The last time someone had touched him like that, 2 decades ago, it had been a disaster. Since then, his body had learned to reject any physical contact from a woman. But then, why was Sophia different? He abruptly stood up, pushing his chair back, and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the city. His reflection in the glass showed a man who, for the first time in a long time, didn't understand himself. This had to be a coincidence, an exception. He needed to test it. 2 hours later, Sophia was focused on a report when Henry's secretary's voice came through the phone. "Mr. Smith wants you to go to his office." Sophia froze. "Again?" "Yes, and bring the report on the investor meeting. He wants you to hand it to him directly." "Directly into his hands?" Sophia raised an eyebrow but grabbed the papers and walked to her boss's office. When she entered, she found Henry standing behind his desk, looking at her with that same severe, unreadable expression as always. "Here is the report, Mr. Smith," she said, walking toward him. Henry reached out his hand. She hesitated for a second. "This guy freaked out a few hours ago because I touched him?" she thought. Still, she extended the papers to him. And then it happened. The moment Henry's fingers brushed against hers, his body tensed again. It was quick, subtle, imperceptible to any observer, but inside him, it felt like worlds colliding. Again, he felt it again. A shock ran through his nerves. His heart skipped a beat. Trying to play it off, he grabbed the papers too quickly, causing one of the sheets to slip and fall to the floor. "Damn." Out of reflex, Sophia bent down to pick it up. But just as she stood up, Henry bent down too. The result? Forehead to forehead. It was a light bump, but enough to create an awkward silence. His eyes were way too close to hers. Sophia held back a laugh. "If this was a reflex test, congratulations, you passed." Henry cleared his throat, straightening up and quickly gathering the papers. "That wasn't a test." "Oh, sure. Bumping heads is a great work method." He didn't respond. He just turned to his desk and pretended nothing had happened. Sophia crossed her arms. "Mr. Smith?" "Yes?" "Are you nervous?" He looked at her with calculated coldness. "I don't get nervous." Sophia smirked. "Then you won't mind if I do this." She raised her hand slightly, pretending she was about to touch him again. Henry took a step back so fast he nearly tripped over his chair. "Silence." Sophia laughed. "Wow, for someone who never gets nervous, that was a pretty dramatic reaction." Henry shot her a sharp glare. "That's enough for today. You can leave." Sophia walked out, still laughing, while Henry, for the first time in years, had no idea how to handle the situation. She was a problem. And worse, he was starting to like it. Henry Smith was officially lost. After the tie incident and that cursed report that forced him to touch, even briefly, Sophia Morris's fingers, he could no longer ignore her presence. And that irritated him deeply. For 20 years, he had lived without anything or anyone breaking his personal barrier. He kept his distance from any physical contact with women, and it had never been an issue. On the contrary, it had become a firm rule, a well-structured system that gave him control over everything. But then, Sophia showed up. She was different from any other assistant he'd ever had. She didn't seem intimidated by him, didn't tremble when speaking to him, and, worse, she didn't take his rules too seriously. And now, Henry was making the #1 mistake for a man like him. He was paying attention to her. Over the past few hours, he had noticed his eyes searching for Sophia, even when he didn't mean to. When he passed by the cafeteria, he saw her laughing with colleagues and felt an absurd irritation for no apparent reason. During a meeting, he noticed she bit her lip when she was focused, and his brain stored that information for no reason at all. And to his absolute frustration, he discovered that Sophia talked to herself when she was alone. Yes, he had seen her earlier in the office, typing something on her computer while mumbling softly to herself. Who came up with these ridiculous spreadsheets? Were they designed to torture assistants? She sighed and then muttered, "If I mess this up, I bet he'll glare at me like I just ruined his entire life." Henry raised an eyebrow. Was she talking about him? He shouldn't be paying attention to this. He shouldn't care. But he did. And then it happened. Sophia made a small mistake. It was just a formatting error in the financial report, nothing catastrophic. But it was enough to catch his attention. He picked up the paper, analyzed the mistake, and pressed the intercom button. "Sophia, in my office. Now." Silence on the other end. After a few seconds, he heard a hesitant voice. "You mean right now? Like right now?" Henry closed his eyes, feeling a wave of impatience. "That's what I said." 2 minutes later, Sophia walked into his office. "If you call me like that over the intercom again, I might have a mini heart attack." Henry didn't respond. He simply held up the report, pointing out the mistake, and stared at her. "What is this?" Sophia tilted her head, frowning. "A piece of paper." He rolled his eyes. "What's wrong with this piece of paper?" She took the sheet and quickly scanned it. Henry crossed his arms, waiting. "Okay, I admit it," Sophia sighed. "I forgot to align the columns in the second chart. But Mr. Smith, let's be honest, no one ever died because of a misaligned table. If I wanted chaos, I'd start a tech company and wear flip-flops to work. But no, I have a reputation to uphold." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "So, you don't wear flip-flops even at home?" Henry closed his eyes for a second, officially running out of patience. "Sophia, all right, she raised her hands. "I'll fix it. No more misaligned tables, I promise." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Henry blurted out without thinking, "Do you always talk to yourself?" Sophia froze in place. Slowly, she turned back to him. "What?" Henry kept his expression neutral. "I saw you mumbling to yourself earlier today. Do you do that often?" Sophia's eyes widened. You saw me talking to myself?" "Yes." She looked genuinely shaken. "Oh no." Sophia covered her face with her hands. "This is terrible." "Why?" "Because I try my best to seem at least somewhat normal. And now you know I have this flaw." Henry frowned. "Talking to yourself is a flaw, isn't it?" "No." Sophia hesitated. "You're not messing with me, are you?" Henry sighed. "Sophia, I don't have time to mess with people. I'm a billionaire CEO." She stared at him for a second, then burst into laughter. And that's when Henry realized how comfortable he felt in that moment. Sophia didn't seem impressed by his wealth. She didn't treat him like some untouchable figure. And without realizing it, he was starting to like that. But he couldn't allow it. If this continued, he would lose control. And Henry Smith never lost control. Ever. Henry Smith didn't like distractions. His world had always been structured, meticulous, with every detail planned to prevent the unexpected. But in the past few days, everything seemed out of place. And all because of her. Sophia Morris. Ever since that woman broke his rules, Henry found himself acting in ways he never expected. He caught himself paying too much attention to her, noticing irrelevant things, like the way she furrowed her brow when concentrating, or the absent-minded way she played with her bracelet while reading a document. This had to stop. Yet, no matter how much he wanted to keep his routine intact, one thing unsettled him more than anything else. The touch. For 20 years, he had avoided any physical contact with women. The mere thought of someone crossing that boundary was enough to make him tense, uncomfortable. And then Sophia appeared, and nothing happened. No disgust, no discomfort, no urge to pull away immediately. That thought tormented him more than he wanted to admit. He shouldn't be thinking about this. He should be focusing on work. But as he held a gold pen in his hand and tried to review a multi-million-dollar contract, his mind dragged him back to the past. A past he had avoided at all costs. 16 years ago. Henry wasn't yet the financial mogul he was today. Back then, he was just a young heir trying to prove his worth in a world of giants. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now let's get back to the story. And like any young and ambitious man, he believed in love. His heart belonged to Amelia Wright, a woman with a sweet smile and captivating eyes. He had given himself completely to that relationship, believing Amelia was his partner, his confidant, his future wife, until the day he discovered the truth. She didn't love him. She loved his money, his status, his influence. And when a more powerful man entered the picture, she left him without hesitation. The breakup wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. Henry remembered the scene as if it had happened yesterday. Amelia holding his hands and saying, in the coldest voice imaginable, "You were never enough." Those words cut into him like sharp blades. That was the moment something inside him broke. That was when he realized that human touch could deceive, that affection could be fake, that any closeness could be a trap. And so, he built his rule. He distanced himself, put up walls. He stopped trusting, stopped allowing himself any kind of vulnerability. His relationships became superficial, purely strategic. And then, 20 years passed. 20 years without touching anyone. Until Sophia Morris. Henry blinked a few times, snapping back to the present. He was gripping his pen so tightly that his fingers had turned white. His heart was beating faster than usual. This had to stop. He would not allow a simple assistant to shake everything he had built. If Sophia had managed to break through his barriers, then he would reinforce them even more. There would be no more casual moments, no more closeness, no more touching. Determined to put an end to this, Henry stood up and walked to the door. He needed to cut this off at the root. Sophia was sitting at her desk, chewing on a granola bar while reviewing a document on her computer. Everything seemed normal, until she felt a pair of eyes practically burning into her. She looked up and saw Henry Smith standing in front of her with the most serious expression she had ever seen. She almost choked. "Mr. Smith?" He crossed his arms. "From now on, we will keep our relationship strictly professional." Sophia blinked. "Wait. Wasn't that already obvious?" He remained firm. "No jokes, no touching, no unnecessary proximity." Sophia stared at him, baffled. "Sorry, boss, but unnecessary proximity? We barely talk outside of work. What do you think I'm doing? Trying to seduce you?" Henry hadn't expected that response. "I didn't say that, but you're acting like I'm some kind of threat to your existence." He opened his mouth to argue but found no words. Because deep down, she was right. He was overreacting. But he needed to react this way. It was the only way to regain control. "Just follow the rules," he said firmly. Sophia narrowed her eyes but didn't argue. "All right, boss, whatever you say." She went back to typing, giving him no further attention. Henry stood there for a few more seconds. For some reason, the idea of Sophia not paying attention to him anymore bothered him deeply. He left before he did something foolish. The next day, Sophia decided to keep her distance. If Henry wanted cold professionalism, he would get it. She simply handed him reports, kept things strictly formal, and didn't interact beyond what was necessary. But to her surprise, he seemed irritated by it. Throughout the day, she noticed fleeting glances, serious expressions, small signs of frustration. And then, something unexpected happened. Late in the afternoon, Henry called Sophia into his office. She walked in and saw that he was holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her. "Here." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You bought me coffee?" Henry looked away. "The barista made a mistake. I grabbed it by accident." She knew that was a lie. "Oh, right, because baristas mix up 2 identical coffees for the same person all the time." He didn't respond. Sophia tried to suppress a smile. Henry Smith was trying to make amends in some way. Maybe, just maybe, he was more confused than he let on. And that only made things even more interesting. That night, Henry Smith realized something even worse than his issues with touch. He realized that, no matter how much he tried to avoid it, Sophia Morris was already in his head, and there was nothing he could do to change that. Henry Smith never liked social events. Gala dinners, business receptions, charity parties. It was always the same people, the same fake smiles, the same superficial questions. But as CEO of Smith Enterprises, he had no choice. His presence was expected, and avoiding these events would only lead to unnecessary speculation. Tonight, he had to attend a charity auction, an event filled with business executives, investors, and socialites pretending to care about noble causes while competing to see who could spend the most money on auctioned items. And to make things worse, he needed to bring a date. Traditionally, CEOs of major companies attended these events with a companion. It could be a business partner, a fiancé, or an influential friend. In Henry's case, all options were equally irritating. And then, without thinking too much, he made an impulsive decision. Sophia. His assistant looked up from her computer, surprised. Yes? He took a deep breath. I have a charity event tonight. I need a date. You're coming with me. She blinked a few times, confused. Excuse me? It's a charity auction. Simple event. You just need to be there, remain discreet, and represent the company by my side. Sophia crossed her arms, studying him. So, let me get this straight. She tilted her head. You've spent the past few days making it very clear that you don't want unnecessary closeness, and now you want me to go to an event with you? Henry kept his serious posture. Yes, she let out an exaggerated sigh. Mr. Smith, I don't know if you've noticed, but you're sending some very mixed signals. Just accept it, Sophia. It will be better than taking anyone else. Wow, thanks for the enthusiasm. He ignored the sarcasm and turned back to his computer screen. Dress appropriately. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophia opened her mouth to reply but gave up. If he wanted to take her to the event, who was she to refuse? At exactly 7 o'clock, Sophia was ready. Unlike her usual casual look at the office, tonight she was stunning. Her black, thin-strapped dress hugged her curves with elegance. Nothing too extravagant. The flowing fabric fell perfectly, highlighting her graceful posture. Her hair, usually tied up in a messy bun at work, now cascaded in soft waves. When Henry arrived, dressed in a flawless black tuxedo, he paused for a second when he saw her. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem? He blinked, quickly regaining his indifferent expression. None. Let's go. They walked to the car, and minutes later, they arrived at the luxurious event hall. The atmosphere was sophisticated. Glittering chandeliers, classical music playing softly in the background, and waiters serving champagne. Sophia glanced around, noticing how many eyes were on Henry. You seem pretty popular here. Popular isn't the right word. Oh right, you're the mysterious CEO who doesn't touch women. I bet half these people are trying to figure out how someone convinced you to bring a date. He sighed. Please watch your words. She smiled. Oh, but where's the fun in that? As they spoke, several guests began approaching Henry to greet him. He maintained his usual composed demeanor, responding politely to each one. Sophia, on the other hand, couldn't help but notice an unwelcome presence. A tall blonde woman with sharp eyes was walking toward them. Her red dress stood out against her fair skin, and her smile was calculated. Henry? The woman said with a cold familiarity. He simply nodded. Amelia. Sophia felt the tension in the air. This was Amelia Wright, the woman who had broken Henry's heart years ago. And judging by the look in her eyes, their story was far from forgotten. I'm surprised to see you here with a date, Amelia said, eyeing Sophia carefully. Sophia saw an opportunity to have a little fun. She slipped her arm through Henry's and smiled warmly. Oh, he's a gentleman. He'd never let me come alone. Henry stiffened. Amelia forced a smile. Is that so? Well, Henry has always been reserved. Sophia tilted her head. Maybe he was just waiting for the right person to break that reserve. Amelia studied her but didn't respond. Then, without another word, she walked away. Henry let out a heavy sigh. That was unnecessary. Sophia shrugged. I refuse to let an ex downplay my presence. You enjoy causing trouble, don't you? She smiled. Let's just say I'm good at leveling the playing field. Henry watched her for a few seconds longer than he should have. There was something different about her. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't intimidated. And for the first time that night, he realized that maybe having her by his side wasn't so bad. Hours later, when they finally left the event, Sophia was exhausted. She sank into the car seat and let out a long sigh. That was more exhausting than a full day at the office. Henry simply drove in silence. She watched him for a moment. So, was the event a success? He nodded. Yes, the company's presence was well received. Sophia smiled. And what about me? Did I pass as a formal event companion? Henry glanced at her briefly before turning his focus back to the road. You were tolerable, she laughed. Is that the closest thing to a compliment I'm going to get? He didn't answer. But for the first time that night, a faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his face. Sophia noticed, and she liked what she saw. When they reached the entrance of her building, she turned to Henry before stepping out. "Thanks for taking me." He nodded. "Good night, Sophia." She smiled and got out of the car. As Henry watched the door of the building close behind her, he felt something strange. He should have been relieved that the night was over, but somehow he wasn't. And that, more than anything else, left him completely confused. Henry Smith couldn't sleep. The clock read 2:43 a.m., and he was still lying in the darkness of his luxurious apartment, staring at the ceiling as if the answer to his frustrations was hidden there. But he knew exactly what was bothering him: Sophia Morris. The night at the event was supposed to be just a formality. He was supposed to take her, fulfill his social obligation, and move on with his life without thinking about it again. But instead, his mind couldn't erase the image of her. The way she smiled when she teased Amelia. The way her black dress flowed as she walked through the ballroom. The way she held his arm without hesitation, without fear, without the caution that every other woman showed around him. And worst of all, he didn't feel the need to pull away. That terrified him. For years, Henry had lived in isolation. Human touch was something he avoided, something that made him uncomfortable, even repulsed. But Sophia didn't affect him the same way. And that was unacceptable. He shut his eyes tightly, trying to push those thoughts away. But every time he tried to block them out, they came back even stronger. Frustrated, he got up and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. Maybe it was just a fleeting whim. Something meaningless. He just needed to stick to his routine and ignore any thoughts about Sophia. That was all. The next morning, Henry arrived at the office at his usual time. He walked through the lobby without looking to the sides, just like he did every day. Employees straightened up as he passed, and no one dared to interrupt his path. But then, his eyes found Sophia. She was sitting at her desk, finishing her coffee, laughing at something Max Turner had said. That laugh, something inside him twisted. Without realizing it, his steps slowed. It was a subtle detail, but Max noticed. The head of finance gave Henry an amused look, as if he knew exactly what was going on. "Good morning, Mr. Smith." Max greeted him with a slightly teasing smile. Henry hardened his expression and kept walking, ignoring the remark. Sophia turned to him, holding a folder of documents. "Good morning, boss. Ready for another intense day of spreadsheets and meetings?" He stopped next to her desk, looking at the folder she was holding. "Is the report ready?" "Right here." She extended the folder to him. Henry hesitated for half a second before taking it. The memory of their last touch was still fresh in his mind. But to his surprise, Sophia didn't let go right away. She held it firmly, forcing him to look her in the eye. "Are you okay?" The question caught him off guard. "What? You seem off today." He kept his expression neutral, pulling the folder from her hands with more force. "I'm perfectly fine." Sophia narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. "If you say so." She turned her attention back to her computer, but Henry stood there for a second longer than he should have. Then, without another word, he turned and walked into his office, trying to ignore the fact that Sophia could see right through his cold exterior. The day dragged on, slow and frustrating. Henry tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to the past few days. He needed to snap out of this. She was just an assistant, an employee like any other. So why couldn't he stop noticing every little detail about her? By the end of the afternoon, he decided to do something to regain control. He called Sophia into his office. When she walked in, she looked completely at ease, as if she wasn't dealing with one of the most feared CEOs in the country. "Go ahead," she said, leaning against the doorframe and crossing her arms. Henry took a deep breath. "From now on, I want to keep all interactions strictly professional. No unnecessary conversations, no jokes." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" "Yes," she tilted her head, studying him. "So I assume that also means you'll stop staring at me all the time, right?" Henry stiffened. "I don't stare at you." Sophia flashed a mischievous smile. "Oh, so it's just a coincidence that every time I look up, your eyes are already on me?" He kept his serious stance. "You're mistaken." She laughed. "If you say so, boss." She turned to leave, but Henry felt something tighten inside him. Before he could think twice, the words left his mouth without him realizing it. "Are you free for dinner tonight?" Sophia stopped in her tracks. She slowly turned around, her eyes slightly wide. "Wait, what?" Henry cleared his throat. "Dinner, with me." Sophia blinked a few times. "Is this a joke?" "No. She studied him for a few seconds. And here I thought you didn't want unnecessary conversations. It's a business dinner. Of course it is. She smirked, and Henry realized he had already lost this battle. 2 hours later, Henry and Sophia were seated in an elegant restaurant. Sophia looked at the menu, pretending to be impressed. Wow, even the prices here seem arrogant. Henry didn't respond. So, is this how you always invite someone to dinner? No explanation, no warning? He set the menu down on the table. I figured you wouldn't say no. She laughed. And I didn't. I'm just surprised. The waiter came to take their orders, and once he walked away, Sophia leaned slightly over the table. Why did you bring me here, Henry? He hesitated. I told you, it's a business dinner. Liar. He raised an eyebrow. What? You didn't bring me here for business. You're trying to test something. Henry went completely still. Sophia smiled. I saw your face at the event last night. You're trying to figure out what changed. She rested her chin on her hand, studying him. What happened to you? Henry didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't have an answer. And worse, he wasn't sure if he wanted one. When the night ended, Henry drove her home. He parked the car and sat in silence. Sophia smiled. I'll admit, that was a nice dinner. Henry kept his eyes on the steering wheel. Sophia? She looked at him. Yes? There was a moment of hesitation. Then, finally, he said what had been on his mind. What did you do to me? Sophia froze. Then, a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. Nothing. She opened the door and stepped out. Henry sat there alone with her answer echoing in his mind. But he knew that, no matter how much she insisted she hadn't done anything, the truth was much simpler. Sophia Morris had changed everything, and now he had no idea what to do about it. Henry Smith had never felt so out of control. In the days following the dinner, he tried everything to get back to his usual routine, to ignore the constant thoughts about Sophia Morris. But with each passing day, it became more obvious that something inside him had shifted. The problem was, he didn't know how to deal with it. Before, everything was simple. He arrived at the office, reviewed reports, closed deals, and left without caring about anyone beyond what was necessary. Now he found himself looking for Sophia in the hallways, trying to catch her laughter, sensing her presence before even seeing her. And worse, whenever she got close, his body reacted in a way it never had before. His heart beat faster. His breathing subtly changed. He noticed little details about her that he never would have before. That's when he realized how dangerous this was. Sophia was becoming a distraction, and he couldn't afford distractions. He needed to fix this before it was too late. By mid-afternoon, Henry was in the conference room reviewing a contract when he heard a loud laugh from outside. Sophia. He knew it was her before even looking. Her laughter was light, spontaneous, full of life. Something that didn't match the cold, serious atmosphere of the office, yet somehow made everything feel less monotonous. He glanced through the glass wall and saw her talking to Max Turner, and it bothered him more than it should have. Max was leaning slightly toward Sophia, saying something that made her laugh again. Henry clenched his jaw. Why the hell was he feeling this? Jealousy? Impossible. He never got jealous, ever. And yet there he was, watching Max Turner and feeling a growing irritation that made no sense. Then, before he even realized it, he was on his feet. He walked straight toward them. Sophia? His voice came out harsher than he intended. She turned to him with a smile, but it faded the moment she saw his expression. Yes, boss? I need to talk to you, now. Max raised an eyebrow, as if he knew exactly what was happening. Well, I guess that's my cue to leave. It was a pleasure talking to you, Sophia. He gave her a wink and walked away. Henry hated that. Sophia crossed her arms. What's the problem? He didn't answer right away, because he had no idea what to say. He had called her over on impulse, without even having a real reason. Sophia tilted her head. Henry, are you okay? Henry blinked, as if only now realizing how ridiculous he was acting. He let out a heavy sigh, frustrated with himself. Forget it, get back to work. He turned to leave, but then he felt it, a light touch on his wrist. It was soft, barely there, but it was enough to make him freeze. He looked down at her hand on his wrist, and his heart pounded. Henry, she said, her voice softer this time, can you be honest with me? What's going on? He couldn't tell her, because the truth was, he didn't even know. So he did what he did best. He pulled away. Nothing. Get back to work. And with that, he walked off without looking back. But he knew he had already lost this battle, because her touch was still burning on his skin. In the days that followed, Henry did everything he could to avoid Sophia. He started delegating more tasks to his team, avoided walking past her department, and even forced himself not to look when he knew she was nearby. But none of it worked, because the more he tried to avoid her, the more she seemed to be everywhere. He stepped into the elevator. Sophia was there. He went to grab coffee. Sophia was already at the cafe. He stayed late at the office. Sophia was leaving at the same time. It was as if the universe was having fun at his expense. And then, one day, she confronted him. Sophia knocked on his office door and walked in without waiting for a response. Henry had known this was going to happen sooner or later. She shut the door behind her and crossed her arms. "Enough, Henry. What's going on?" He kept his posture firm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't? Then why have you been avoiding me?" He didn't answer. Sophia let out an exasperated sigh. "If this is about that night at dinner, just say it. Did I do something wrong?" "No." "Then why are you acting like I'm some kind of threat?" Henry ran a hand over his face, feeling his exhaustion grow. "Sophia, it's nothing. Just forget it." She studied him for a few seconds, then gave him a knowing smile. "Henry, are you afraid of me?" His eyes shot up to meet hers instantly. "Don't be ridiculous. Then prove it." She stepped closer. Henry didn't move. "If you really feel nothing, then there's no reason to be uncomfortable, right?" She took another step. His heartbeat sped up. She raised her hand and lightly touched his wrist. The touch was gentle, but it hit Henry like an electric shock. Sophia smiled. "See, you're nervous." Henry immediately pulled away. "That means nothing." "Of course not," she laughed. "You're just pale as a sheet and looking like a teenager who just got kissed for the first time." He didn't find it funny. "Sophia, stop this." "No, because I know there's something here." She studied him closely. "And I'm going to figure out what it is." Henry didn't respond. He couldn't, because at that moment, he realized Sophia was right. There was something there, something he wasn't ready to face. And no matter how much he tried to deny it, he knew he wouldn't be able to avoid it for much longer. Henry Smith was reaching his limit. For the past few days, he had tried every possible tactic to ignore the fact that Sophia Morris was becoming his biggest distraction. But nothing worked. Avoiding her only made the urge to look at her stronger. Pretending not to care only made him more irritated. And now, to make things worse, she knew. Sophia knew something had changed in him. And that made her an even bigger problem. She had started pushing him, testing the boundaries he had always kept so firm, touching his wrist without hesitation, teasing his discomfort, making him feel things he shouldn't feel. He didn't want to give her that power, but at the same time, he couldn't pretend he wasn't affected anymore. And then came the final blow. That night, Henry had a corporate event on the rooftop of one of the city's most luxurious hotels. He knew Sophia would be there. Her job required it. But he wasn't prepared for what he saw. The moment he arrived, his eyes immediately found her. Sophia wore a deep wine-colored dress, elegant, perfectly fitted, with an open-back design that revealed just enough. Her hair fell in soft waves, and the smile she gave to those around her was bright, effortless, too easy. Henry hated the way he felt when he saw her like that. He didn't know exactly what it was, but if he had to describe it, he'd say it felt like possessiveness, and that was dangerous, very dangerous. The night dragged on. He tried to keep his composure, greeting investors, discussing business, avoiding Sophia's presence whenever possible. But every time he glanced at the room, there she was, laughing, talking to someone, shining like she was meant to be the center of attention. Then, he saw something that crossed the line. Sophia was at the bar, talking to a man Henry knew well. Nathan Carter, a charming businessman, smooth, well-known for his flirtatious ways, and never missing an opportunity with a beautiful woman. Henry saw the exact moment Nathan placed his hand on Sophia's waist. Something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he crossed the room quickly. Sophia was laughing at something Nathan had said when she felt a presence beside her. Before she could react, Henry gripped her arm, firm but not rough. She turned to him, startled. "Henry?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Well, if it isn't Henry Smith, are you interrupting something?" Henry ignored the comment and looked straight at Sophia. "I need to talk to you. Now." She blinked, confused. "We're in the middle of a conversation. Can it wait a minute?" Henry didn't answer. He only tightened his hold slightly, just enough for her to feel the tension in his touch. Nathan chuckled, as if he understood everything. "Relax, Henry. I wasn't going to steal your girl." Sophia's eyes widened. "What? No." But Henry was already pulling her away. He led her to a more secluded area of the rooftop, away from prying eyes. Sophia yanked her arm free and crossed her arms. "What is your problem?" Henry ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. He was touching you. She blinked. So what? It was just a casual touch. He met her eyes, unwavering. I didn't like it. Sophia was speechless for a moment. Then slowly a teasing smile formed on her lips. Henry, are you jealous? He swallowed hard. No. Then what's the reason for all of this? He had no answer. Sophia stepped closer. Tell me the truth. Henry could smell her. The closeness was suffocating, overwhelming. There is no truth, he said, voice low. She tilted her head, studying him. So if I did it again, with another man, you wouldn't care? Henry closed his eyes for a brief second. Then, before he could stop himself, he gripped the back of her neck and kissed her. It was fast, intense, no hesitation. Sophia froze for a second, but then she kissed him back, grabbing him by the lapels of his jacket. The world around them disappeared. The noise of the party faded. All that existed was their touch. Henry was the one to pull away first. He opened his eyes slowly and saw Sophia staring at him, surprised, breathless, and that's when reality hit him. This should never have happened, he said, his tone cold. Sophia blinked. What? He took a step back. It was a mistake. She crossed her arms, eyes locked on his. So you kiss me like that, and now decide it was a mistake? Henry didn't know what to say. He could still taste her on his lips. His body still burned where she had touched him. But he couldn't let this go any further. He couldn't let her have that kind of power over him. Forget it, he said, forcing his voice to stay cold. Sophia let out a sarcastic laugh. Henry, you are unbelievable. He turned to leave. But before he could take more than 2 steps, he felt her hand on his arm again. Don't run. He stopped. But he didn't look at her. She stepped closer. You kissed me, Henry. You pulled me in, and now you want to pretend it didn't happen? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to regain control. Then, without turning around, he said the only thing that could push her away. It was just an impulse. That's all. Sophia stood still. Henry felt the tension in her silence. Then, she let go of his arm. All right, if that's how you want to play this, then we'll play it that way. There was no anger in her voice, only determination. And in that moment, Henry knew he hadn't pushed her away. If anything, he had just made things even more dangerous. And now, he had nowhere left to run. Henry Smith was losing control. In the days following the kiss, he did everything in his power to pretend it never happened. He ignored Sophia at the office, buried himself in meetings, contracts, anything to keep his mind occupied. Created even more professional distance, refusing to let their eyes meet for more than a few seconds. But none of it worked. Because every time he closed his eyes, he could still taste her on his lips. Every time he heard her laugh somewhere in the office, he remembered the warmth of her body against his. And every time he saw Sophia walk past him without even glancing his way, something tightened in his chest. She was playing dirty. She didn't confront him, didn't demand explanations, didn't ask questions. She simply acted as if he didn't exist. And it was killing him a little more each day. By Friday night, Henry decided he needed to get out. He wasn't much of a drinker, but tonight, he didn't want to think. So he went to an upscale bar in the city center, a discreet place where CEOs and executives came to unwind after exhausting weeks. He ordered a whiskey and sat in the farthest corner of the room, glass in hand, mind filled with thoughts he shouldn't be having. But then, things got worse. Because the moment he leaned back in his chair to take a sip, he saw Sophia walk into the bar. And she wasn't alone. Beside her, laughing and looking completely at ease, was Max Turner. Henry felt his blood boil. He didn't know what was worse, the fact that she was here, in the same bar as him, or the fact that she was with another man. Worse yet, Max? Max was sharp. He knew exactly what he was doing. And no matter how much Henry tried to pretend he didn't care, he did. He hated the idea of Sophia with any other man. She hadn't seen him yet. But then, as if she could feel his gaze, she lifted her eyes in his direction. A moment of silence. Their eyes met. Henry's body went rigid. Sophia held the eye contact for a brief moment. Then she smiled, and turned her attention back to Max, as if Henry wasn't even there. Henry gripped his glass tightly. She was playing against him, and she was winning. 10 minutes later, Henry had had enough. He wasn't going to sit there, pretending not to care, while Sophia laughed and talked with Max as if he didn't exist. So before he could change his mind, he stood up and walked toward her. Max noticed him first. "Ah, Henry, what are you doing here?" Henry didn't respond. He looked straight at Sophia. "Can we talk?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Now?" "Now." She seemed amused by that. "Sorry, but I'm busy." Henry felt his patience slipping. 5 minutes. That's all I need. Sophia let out a dramatic sigh and glanced at Max. Do you mind? Max shrugged. As long as he doesn't kidnap you, go ahead. Sophia smiled and stood up. All right then, 5 minutes. Henry grabbed her arm and led her to a quieter corner of the bar. Sophia turned to him, crossing her arms. Well, what was so important? Henry didn't know where to start. He looked at her, trying to find the right words, trying not to sound as desperate as he felt. But then Sophia tilted her head and smiled again. Henry, are you jealous? It was like an electric shock ran through him. He couldn't deny it, but he couldn't admit it either. Don't be ridiculous, she raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here, pulling me away from my date? His fists clenched. This is not a date. Oh, and you get to decide who I go out with now? Henry didn't answer. Sophia took a step closer. Tell me the truth, Henry. What do you want from me? He didn't know. Or rather, he did. But he couldn't say it, so instead of speaking, he acted. Before he could stop himself, he cupped the back of her neck and kissed her. This was different from the first kiss. This wasn't an impulse. It was surrender. Sophia responded immediately. She gripped the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer, their lips moving together, their breaths mixing. The bar, the people, the world disappeared. Only they existed. When they finally pulled apart, Henry saw it in her eyes. Nothing would ever be the same. Is this still a mistake? Sophia asked, breathless. He ran a hand over his face, frustrated with himself. Yes, Sophia laughed. Well, I don't think so. Henry didn't know what to do anymore. But he knew one thing. He couldn't run from this any longer. Henry Smith had never been this out of control. He had spent his entire life avoiding emotions, keeping himself distant from anything that could threaten his self-control. But now, looking at Sophia Morris, still tasting her on his lips, he knew he had completely lost this battle. He kissed her again. Without thinking, without hesitation, without barriers. This time there was no tension, no resistance. There was only him and her, and the undeniable desire they could no longer ignore. Sophia matched his intensity. She clutched his shirt tightly, as if she had no intention of letting him go, as if she had finally gotten what she wanted all along. When they pulled apart, breathless, Henry couldn't say a word. He didn't need to. Sophia smiled. Finally, something twisted inside him. He no longer knew what was right or wrong, but he knew he couldn't fight this anymore. In the days that followed, everything changed. Henry tried to act as if nothing had happened. He forced himself to keep his usual professional stance, to show nothing. But for the first time, Sophia wouldn't let him. She was everywhere. At the office, she looked at him with that teasing smile. In the hallways, she walked just a little too close. During meetings, she stared at him as if she knew exactly what he was trying to hide. And Henry realized he was at a disadvantage. Because unlike him, Sophia wasn't afraid to admit what she wanted, and with each passing day, he was giving in. On Friday, he arrived at the office and found a coffee on his desk. He frowned. What is this? Sophia smiled from her desk. A coffee. Why? Because I wanted to. He looked at her, trying to make sense of the gesture. Sophia just kept smiling. And then Henry realized he was smiling too. He couldn't deny it anymore. She affected him, in a way no one ever had before. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to run from it anymore. That night, Henry was in his apartment, trying to work, when he heard a notification on his phone. A message. I'm outside your building. Are you going to invite me up? Or are you going to keep pretending nothing is happening? Henry felt his heart race. He could ignore it. He could simply not respond. But he didn't want to. So he answered. Henry, come up. Minutes later, Sophia stood in front of him. She was dressed casually, jeans and a black top. But to Henry, she had never looked more beautiful. She crossed her arms and smiled. You're not that hard to break, you know? Henry watched her in silence, and then he did what he had wanted to do since the very first day. He pulled her close and kissed her. This time, without fear, without hesitation. The kiss that started as a spark turned into an uncontrollable fire. Henry pulled Sophia closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his hands exploring her back as he finally allowed himself to feel everything he had been denying. Sophia didn't hold back. She had wanted him for a long time. And now, there were no more barriers. His apartment was quiet, but the air between them was charged. Henry knew he should stop. But he couldn't. The feel of her skin beneath his fingertips, her scent, the way her lips fit perfectly against his. It was all too intense. But the moment Sophia slid her hands over his chest, trying to undo the buttons of his shirt, he pulled back. It was automatic, instinctive. He stepped away as if he had been jolted by electricity. Sophia looked at him, confused. What's wrong? Henry ran a hand through his hair, taking a deep breath, trying to find the right words. But there were no right words. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Sophia crossed her arms, studying him. Henry, do you want me to leave? The thought of her walking out left an odd emptiness in his chest. He didn't want her to go, but he also didn't know how to move forward. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. I think this was a mistake. Sophia froze. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she laughed. But it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief. A mistake? Seriously, Henry? He didn't respond. Sophia shook her head, disappointed. You know what? I should have expected this. You always do this, don't you? The moment something feels out of your control, you push it away. Henry didn't deny it, because she was right. Sophia grabbed her bag and headed for the door. But before leaving, she glanced over her shoulder. You can't run from this forever, Henry. And then, she was gone. Henry stood there, alone, feeling the echo of her presence still filling the apartment. And for the first time, he felt truly lost. In the days that followed, Henry buried himself in work. If he had been reserved before, now he was practically a ghost in his own office. He avoided Sophia at all costs. If he stepped into the elevator and saw her there, he walked out before the doors closed. If she walked into the conference room, he found a reason to leave before they could be alone. But he knew this couldn't last forever. And he was right. It was late at night when Sophia finally cornered him. Henry was leaving the office when he saw her standing next to his car. She was waiting for him, arms crossed, determination written all over her face. He considered going back inside. But he knew she wouldn't let this go easily. With a sigh, he walked toward her. Sophia, what are you doing here? I'm waiting for you to stop acting like an idiot. His expression hardened. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're just making it complicated. Henry unlocked the car, but before he could open the door, Sophia placed her hand over his. The touch was soft but electric. He froze. She stepped closer. Tell me the truth, Henry. He tried to pull away, but she held firm. Do you want me? Yes or no? Henry shut his eyes. Then he told the truth. Yes. Sophia smiled, then stopped running. He looked at her. What if I mess this up? She laughed. You already are. Henry knew she was right. And in that moment, he made his decision. He let out a heavy breath. And then, he pulled Sophia into a kiss. This time he didn't pull back. No fear, no hesitation, no intention of letting her go. This time, Henry didn't retreat. He held Sophia firmly, deepening the kiss with all the intensity he had been trying to deny. There were no more walls, no more excuses, just the two of them, finally giving in to the inevitable. Sophia responded without hesitation, gripping the collar of his shirt and pulling him closer, as if she had finally gotten what she wanted from the very first day. Then, thunder rumbled in the sky. They pulled apart just enough to realize the rain was coming. Sophia laughed, her hands still gripping his shirt. Looks like the universe wants to make this scene even more dramatic. Henry glanced up at the heavy clouds overhead. And then, he made a decision. Get in the car. Sophia studied him for a moment. Then, she smiled and obeyed. The first few minutes inside the car were silent. Sophia kept her eyes on him, waiting for him to speak first. Henry, on the other hand, was still trying to process what he had just done. He had kissed her. Again. And this time, he couldn't pretend it was a mistake. Because it wasn't. It was the most right thing he had done in years. Sophia leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. So, is this the part where you run again? Henry didn't look away. No. Good. She smiled. Because I was getting tired of that. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. I'm not good at this. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Good at what? He hesitated. Relationships. Sophia laughed. Neither am I, but I don't think that's a problem. Henry looked at her. What if I mess everything up? She met his gaze, unwavering. Then we fix it. He had never met anyone like her. Someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who didn't pull away. And for the first time he wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could stop running too. In the days that followed, everything changed. And yet, nothing changed. They were still Henry Smith and Sophia Morris, boss and assistant, CEO and employee. But now there was something more. Their glances lingered a little longer. Their touches were more frequent, even if subtle. And above all, there was an unspoken tension between them. Sophia loved testing his limits. Once, during a meeting, she deliberately dropped a pen near him. When she bent down to pick it up, she whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "You're looking at me." Henry didn't react, but inside he felt it. She challenged him constantly. And the worst part? He liked it. But Henry still wasn't fully ready. He kept their relationship a secret. He never talked about it. He never did anything to make it official. And Sophia noticed, it was on a Friday night while they were having dinner at his apartment, that she finally brought it up. "How long are we going to keep this up?" Henry looked at her confused. "Keep what up?" Sophia put down her fork and crossed her arms. "You know what I mean. This, us. You act like we're together, but at the same time, you keep everything so quiet it's like we're hiding a crime." Henry didn't answer right away, because he knew she was right, but he didn't know how to change it. Sophia sighed. "Henry, are you ashamed of me?" His eyes widened. "What? No. Then why does it feel like you're afraid to admit we're together?" Henry ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "It's not that. I've never done this before." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then gently she asked, "Are you afraid of losing me?" Henry felt the weight of those words. Because yes, he was afraid. Afraid of getting attached, afraid of opening up, afraid of trusting and being left behind again. Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. "Henry, I'm not Amelia." He held his breath. Sophia continued, "I'm not her. I won't walk away when things get hard, but you have to let me in." Henry felt something inside him crack, because he wanted to believe her, but he wasn't sure if he could, and that terrified him more than anything. In the days that followed, Henry became even more distant, not intentionally, but because he was handling all of this the wrong way. And Sophia noticed. She didn't push him, but she didn't like it. And on a Wednesday, everything finally exploded. Sophia was called into a meeting with Henry and the company's other executives. Throughout the entire meeting, he barely looked at her. He acted as if nothing had ever happened between them. And that was the last straw. As soon as the meeting ended, Sophia followed him into his office and shut the door behind her. Henry turned around, surprised. "What is it?" Sophia didn't waste any time. "What do you want from me, Henry?" He frowned. "What are you talking about? Do you want me? Yes or no?" He said nothing. Sophia took a step closer. "Because if you don't, then tell me now. But if you do, then stop treating me like a stranger in front of everyone else." Henry felt a tightness in his chest. He knew he had to make a choice, but he still wasn't ready, so he made a mistake. "Maybe it's best if we end this." Sophia froze. For a moment she said nothing. Then she laughed, but it wasn't amusement, it was bitterness. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "Congratulations, Henry, you got what you wanted." And then, she was gone. This time, Henry didn't stop her. And that was the biggest mistake of his life. Henry Smith thought he was doing the right thing. He had spent years building walls around himself, protecting himself from anything that could make him lose control. But now, as he stared at the closed door where Sophia had just walked out, he knew. He knew he had made a colossal mistake. He wanted to believe this was for the best, that keeping his distance was the most rational choice. But then came the silence. And for the first time in a long time, he realized just how unbearable that silence was. Sophia, on the other hand, didn't want to think about him. She was tired. Tired of waiting for Henry to admit what he felt. Tired of pretending everything was fine when, in reality, it wasn't. So the next day, she simply moved on. Or at least she tried to. But ignoring Henry wasn't easy. He was everywhere. In the office, in meetings, in the hallways. And every time she saw him, she could feel his eyes on her. But this time, she didn't look back. She was determined to live her life without him. And Henry didn't know how to handle that. In the days that followed, Henry became a different man. He was still the same ruthless, disciplined CEO. But inside, he was a mess. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat properly. And worst of all, he couldn't stop thinking about her. His apartment felt empty without her presence. The office felt cold without her teasing. And Henry started to realize something terrifying. He no longer knew how to live without Sophia Morris. But Sophia wasn't going to wait for him. On Friday night, she went out with friends. Henry only found out because by chance he saw a picture of her on social media. She was at a bar, smiling, holding a colorful drink in her hand. And next to her, there was a man. He couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't just jealousy, it was panic. Because for the first time, Henry realized that she could actually move on without him, and he wasn't ready for that. That same night, he went after her. He had never done anything so irrational in his entire life, but he didn't care. When he walked into the bar and saw Sophia laughing, enjoying herself, he knew he had to do something. He couldn't let her go, so he walked straight to her. Sophia noticed him instantly, and she didn't hide her surprise. "What are you doing here?" Henry didn't answer, because he didn't know what to say. Then Sophia narrowed her eyes. "Oh, I see. You pushed me away, and now you show up stalking me? Henry felt his stomach twist. I need to talk to you. Sophia let out a sharp laugh, crossing her arms. No. Henry froze. Sophia, please. Now you say please? Where was that humility when you tossed me aside like I was a problem? Henry had no answer. Sophia took a deep breath and grabbed her purse. You know what? Let's just get this over with. Say what you need to say. Henry hesitated, but he knew he couldn't run anymore. So he said the only thing that mattered. I love you, Sophia. Sophia went still. Henry had never felt so vulnerable in his life. What? She asked, like she wasn't sure she heard him right. Henry took a deep breath. I love you. Sophia didn't say a word. Then she laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Really? Now you decide to tell me this? Henry's heart pounded. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but Sophia cut him off. Henry, I waited so long to hear that. She sighed, looking at him. But now, I don't know if I still want to. Henry felt his chest tighten. Sophia smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. If you really love me, you'll have to prove it. And then, she walked away. This time he knew he had to chase after her, because if he didn't, he would lose her forever. Henry Smith was not willing to lose Sophia Morris. He had made every mistake possible, pushed her away, ran from his own feelings, and refused to admit the truth. But now, after seeing her walk away, knowing she might actually be gone for good, he realized something terrifying. He didn't exist without her. Sophia Morris was the only thing in his life that made sense, and he was going to prove it. The next morning, Sophia was at her desk, trying to focus on work, when she heard a commotion. Murmurs, whispers, people turning around, some holding up their phones as if they were recording something. She frowned. What's going on? She asked Max, who was staring down the hallway, surprised. He smirked. I think your boss has lost his mind. Before she could ask, Henry Smith appeared. But not like usual. He wasn't wearing his perfectly tailored suit. He didn't look serious or intimidating. He was barefoot, holding a massive bouquet of flowers, and his suit was completely disheveled. Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. Henry looked nervous, clearly uncomfortable, but he kept walking, determined. He stopped right in front of her desk, and then he knelt down. The entire office froze. Sophia was speechless. Everyone held their breath. And then Henry spoke. Sophia Morris. He swallowed hard, looking like a man who had never been this vulnerable in his life. I was an idiot. A complete, absolute, ridiculous idiot. Someone in the back muttered, That's true. And Henry shot them a deadly glare. Then he turned back to Sophia. I ran because I was scared, because I've never felt anything like this before. Because you, Sophia, did something no one else ever has. Sophia still wasn't sure if this was real or if she had hit her head and was hallucinating. But Henry kept going. You made me feel. The entire room let out a collective sigh. Henry took a deep breath. And now I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to spend another second without you. Because without you, nothing makes sense. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Sophia's eyes widened. Henry opened it. Inside, a diamond engagement ring sparkled under the light. He gave her a nervous, lopsided smile. So, Sophia Morris, will you marry me and put up with me for the rest of your life, even though I'm the most stubborn, difficult man on the planet? The office erupted into murmurs. Someone laughed. Max whistled. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. And then, something unexpected happened. She laughed. Because this was so ridiculously perfect, so Henry Smith, that she couldn't believe this was the same man who had run from her for so long. She looked at him, kneeling there, and felt her heart overflow. So she gave the only possible answer. Of course, I'll marry you, you idiot. Henry let out a relieved laugh, took the ring and slid it onto her finger. And the moment she looked at him again, he kissed her. Right there, in the middle of the office, in front of everyone. And no one had ever seen Henry Smith so happy. Months later, Sophia still couldn't believe it was real. She stood in front of the mirror, wearing a stunning wedding dress, trying to process the fact that in just a few minutes, she would become Henry Smith's wife. His wife. If someone had told her this months ago, she would have laughed. But now, looking at her reflection, she knew. She knew that everything had happened exactly the way it was meant to. The door opened, and Max stepped inside. Are you ready? Sophia took a deep breath, smiled, and nodded. More than ever, Henry stood at the altar, more nervous than he had ever been in any business meeting in his life. He had never liked ceremonies, never liked being the center of attention. But the moment he saw Sophia walking into the church, he forgot how to breathe. She was perfect. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He knew this was what he wanted. what he had always wanted. She walked toward him, her smile radiant, and when she stopped by his side, Henry took her hand and whispered, "You look absolutely stunning." Sophia smiled. "And you're sweating," he chuckled. And then, the wedding began. The vows were emotional. Sophia made Henry laugh and cry at the same time. And when it was time to say, "I do," Henry didn't hesitate for even a second. Because for the first time in his life, he was absolutely certain of what he wanted. And what he wanted was Sophia. The reception was unforgettable. Max gave a speech that left half the guests laughing until they cried. Sophia dragged Henry onto the dance floor even though he insisted he didn't know how to dance. And at the end of the night, as they watched the fireworks light up the sky, Henry pulled her into a tight embrace. "I never thought I'd be able to have this," he whispered. Sophia smiled against his chest. "Have what?" He looked into her eyes. "Someone like you." Sophia kissed him gently. "Well, get used to it. Because now, you're stuck with me." Henry smiled. Because this time, he didn't want to run. He only wanted to stay. Forever. What did you think of Henry and Sophia's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. And don't forget to check out more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.